So we are having this interview session today, organized by Forum for Global Studies. It's on 1 year of Russia-Ukraine war and how is it shaping the global world order. Interestingly, we are conducting it on eve of first anniversary of the war. And before we begin with that interview proper, may I first take this privilege to introduce our very honored guest, Mr. Ravinder Sachdev, who is Director of India Affairs. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining us on this very important event. Introducing Mr. Ravinder Sachdev, he is the Director of India Affairs at UN INPAC, a recognized expert on foreign affairs and economic diplomacy. He was featured as one of the 12 most influential Indian Americans, along with Mr. Bobby Jindal, Mr. Sanjay Puri, Mr. Farid Zakaria, and Professor Jagdish Bhagwati by the Business and Economy magazine in 2007. What a great honor that was, sir. Almost 20 years ago, he pioneered software-based professional political consulting in India and went on to work as consultant with the staff of former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. Mr. Sachdev is frequently quoted in the media and hosts of weekly shows on foreign affairs on regional TV channels in India. He publishes about 24 op-ed articles every year in leading Indian and US publications. Mr. Sachdev is also president of Image India Institute, an independent think tank that extensively works with Indian diaspora in India to promote imagination of India. He holds an MBA, International Business, and an MA, International Relations from American universities. He also served as adjunct professor at Washington, D.C. and has B.Tech Electrical Engineering from G.B. Pant University, Pantnagar. We are truly honored to have you with us this evening, sir.
Thank you so much, Colonel.
So before we start the interview, I would just give a little introductory lines. The 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine began on the morning of 24th February, when Mr. Putin announced a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. And minutes later, missiles and airstrikes hit all across Ukraine, including its capital, Kyiv. It was shortly followed by a large ground invasion on multiple fronts. Many experts say that it was not Russia who started this war, and this war did not start in 2022. It actually started way back in 2014, and even before that, and has some historical roots. Many experts quote, especially John Mersheimer, he blames EU expansionism, NATO expansionism, and fostering of Orange Revolution around the world by Americans and Western allies. Because of this war, the shortages of food, fuel, and fertilizer were noticed all over the world. And who was facing the brunt? It was the poorer nations in Asia, Africa, Latin America, who face these shortages and are riddled with inflation today. There are some wild views in the environment, and one of the experts even went on to say, to the extent that the US wasn't happy with Germany's growing economical and political clout in Europe, and it perceived Germany as their competitor and threat, and hence US waged this war by proxy. Now we come to the interview proper, sir. And may I start by asking you, what do you think were the major compulsions of Russia which forced them to launch a full-fledged war on Ukraine? Was it that Russia probably believed that there was lack of unity amongst NATO nations, or was it overconfidence on their own army's capabilities? The floor is to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Colonel Singh, and thank you so much for your gracious introduction. A pleasure to be with you and Dr. Tripathi, and an honor to be on your forum for Global Studies and a very timely discussion. Okay, why did Russia move, let's say, on Ukraine last February? I think one is obvious, which is absolutely out there, that Russia was getting a sense over a period of time of being encircled by an expanding NATO. Right? If you look back, ever since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the numbers of the NATO countries has increased by and by, including former, of course, Warsaw Pact countries, and then former republics of the Soviet Union itself also, the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Ukraine was putting up here. So that's one. The other is also a reason that NATO expansion or no NATO expansion, Russia was, let's say, looking at Ukraine with a lot of concern. And of course, also, if you look back in a little bit of history, Crimea 2014, which Russia annexed, and then the situation in the east of Ukraine. So I think these were factors. What immediately triggered, you're absolutely right, perhaps it was some overconfidence, some miscalculations. I would, as we go deeper into this discussion, I would lay a large amount of blame, if you were to, on, I think, intelligence. Russian intelligence was weak, that means, or was faulty, incomplete, right? So these were factors out there, but yes, the bottom line catalyst, I would say, and I would feel, is NATO policies and the US approach to slowly, if not encircle Russia for that matter, but yes, to expand NATO. Past 30 odd years, again, since the Soviet Union, Russia was kind of left on its own. Russia kind of, I think, walked into capitalism, starry-eyed and looking at, capitalism. And for a while, Russia had the wildest of capitalism. In the 90s, it was just totally up for the takes, and that's when the oligarchs came up, etc. So partially also, I would say that the US and the West failed to assimilate Russia into the democratic or democracy order of things. Had that handholding to some extent been more, Russia may not have gone rogue as per the West as it is now. So to a large extent, I'll lay the blame pure and square on American and NATO policies. But yes, who fired the first shot? Yes, it is Putin.
Great, sir. And as you clearly brought out, there's one very significant fact here. I believe that more than weapons and ammunition that is being supplied by the Western Bloc or the US to Ukraine, it is the intelligence and surveillance and satellite data that they're getting is the biggest asset that they're getting. And that's how they have been surviving this brutal war. Otherwise, without their intelligence, things would have been very different. So coming on to the next question, India was treading a very delicate path as the war started. It tried to remain as neutral to both the sides as it could. And there are recently and historically, when the war started, there were a number of actions and statements that India issued and the actions that India took. Some of them I would just like to elaborate. It was going towards reshaping the global order. India repeatedly said that it is always believing in dialogue, respecting state sovereignty, which is how this war should end, by dialogue and by respecting state sovereignty. In fact, initial days of war, it even provided humanitarian aid to Ukrainians. PM's remark was quite noticeable the world over that this is not an era for war. And there's one interesting fact. It was last year in New York when the US Secretary of State was in a casual conversation. He asked our foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, as to what India is likely to choose Eastern Bloc or Western Bloc? To which promptly our foreign minister said that we have already chosen India. How significant that interesting fact is. Despite all the sanctions, India continued till date to import Russian oils and at a discounted rate. Even recently, our foreign minister said about the BBC documentary and its timing it was released, that it is the Western nations and some of the Western nations are playing politics by other means. Sir, how do you think India has played out this war till date? And what are your views on emerging that muscle flexing that India is doing at the global level?
Thank you so much, Colonel Singh. I'll come to India's policies, but as you mentioned, the support by Western intelligence agencies and surveillance to Ukraine as being a very valuable contributor, absolutely yes. Another facet which has come out is that Russia's electronic communication networks capabilities are weaker, are not modern as compared to the West, and which were supplied to Ukraine and which Ukraine has used to huge effectiveness. That said, since 2014, 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers were trained every year by the NATO forces in a huge campus next to Lviv, right? And that training has helped Ukraine a lot. 10,000 soldiers per year into 8 years till 22 was 80,000 soldiers who were trained, and then they were actually supposed to be trained the trainers. So after their trainings, they would go and they would train the other soldiers also within the units and commands. Now that training reorganized Ukraine's military structure, reporting mechanism, the agility, the flexibility as compared to the Soviet system, which Ukrainians earlier had. And you being an army officer would very well understand that, which has also cost Russia heavily on the battlefield. So NATO's training of the Ukrainian forces, modernization not only of the weapons that come later, but modernizations of the organization itself has played a very important role in, let's say, enabling Ukraine to be where it is. Now coming to India and India's role. The way I look at it, I think that when the war started, India was on the sidelines, and we would have rather wished that the war did not happen, right? But at the same time, given our earlier and long and historic and strategic relations with Russia, we played on the quiet, by the side. The first challenge we had was, of course, when we had to evacuate our Indian students from Ukraine. That was the first challenge our foreign policy faced. So fine, we executed that admirably, and we got our students out. Though initially it was a bit delayed, the start of it, because we, like the whole of the world, we were also caught by surprise, I would think. So the initial months, India just continued being on the sidelines. But then over a period of time, and then when Russia started offering oil, and suddenly in about a month or two down the line, we started buying oil. And then we did face pressure from the West and Europe without doubt about our policy with regards to Russia. We were asked questions. In fact, some of our defense contracts have been held back from Russia under that pressure since then. We had a deal which was signed for about $2.1 billion for the upgrade of MiG-29s and additional some MiG-29s and some Sukhoi 30s. That has been put on hold. And the US State Department officially told the US Congress, because I think sometime 2 or 3 months down the line, the US Congress asked in an open briefing the State Department that why is India still not condemning Russia? To which the State Department official, Donald Lu, he said, we understand India's historic ties. India is coming around. In the past 3 months, India has delayed this contract on MiGs and the aircrafts, another contract on the helicopters, and there was a third element he mentioned also. He said these 3 are examples that India is slowly wearing around and will downgrade the situation with Russia. That was about 3 months down, right? But then as the period progressed, and we started finding our feet, I would say this way, right? because this was the first ever crisis of this kind in the world, which world is facing and we are facing our diplomacy. I think we started finding our feet and finding our rationale to argue out our case stronger. That, okay, this is something that we need for our country's needs. If you remember, Jaishankar said that, my moral duty is to be fellow citizens of my country, where our GDP is, let's say, $2,000 per person, whereas you guys have a GDP of $50,000 or $40,000 a person. So how do you compare us with you, that we undertake these sacrifices and that we're buying more oil in one single afternoon than we buy in a month and a half? So we started finding our rationale and our articulation of that rationale scaled up. Then there was this still, okay, so the discussion was still between whatever the world powers and all. India was still, politely people were saying Macron and Putin, okay, India can play a role. That was, I would say, polite speak, without any depth of meaning. But then in Samarkand at the SCO summit, when Prime Minister Modi, in his public remarks with President Putin, said that this is, Mr. President, we all understand that this is not the era of war. Now, the important thing to note in this is that, it had been about 6 months since the war by then. India had not made any clear statement. Okay, we were voting in the UN, we were abstaining in the UN with regards to any Russia-related resolutions. So the world was kind of saying and asking that, okay, what is India doing? What is India's stance? So when Modi said this statement that this is not the era of war, it was picked up worldwide by the media that India now says. So, in a way, that statement had a big impact amongst world elites and world opinion makers, that India is now saying to Russia that this is not the era of war, and I would add, this is the era to live and let live. So that brought India's role a little more clearly into the focus, that, okay, India is maintaining a neutral stance, but India is cautioning and advising Russia that this is not the era of war. Though I would say that was a message, it's not only for Russia, it's for all the parties to the war. It's to the US and NATO also. This is not the era of war. Sorry. So that's when I think India's position and clarity, and by then I think the West had also understood that India will not bend to its diktats or its pressures or its the way it wants us to align. So the US and Europe started recognizing that. Prior to that, you remember there was a flurry of visits from, various European countries, US officials and all coming by, and everyone trying to, pull away India from Russia. But I think around that time, they kind of, if not gave up, they understood that, okay, yes, India has a rationale and India will tread its own path. And I think ever since then, we've actually gotten stronger and more convinced of the path that we laid out, that we will look after our interests. Europe's wars are not our wars. Okay, just as our wars you think are not yours. I mean, the world is not only Eurocentric or Euro-Atlantic centric. So that has come out forth a lot. If not a lot, that has come through clearly. But still, I would very clearly and humbly say we are under immense pressures from the US and Europe still to keep on downgrading our relations with Russia. And I do anticipate some of that will happen. It's already happening. It will keep happening. Another reason for it is that the lessons that we're learning from Russia, sure, Russia is a great friend, was a great friend in our needs, has been with us, even in the UN Security Councils and all. But looking at where Russia is now, if we look at the realpolitik, I mean, we buy huge weapons from Russia, as you, of course, have used them maybe also, right? But the point is that the experience of this war is showing that the Russian armaments are perhaps not as cutting edge. They have design flaws. So for our own national security, further down the road, will we buy as much from Russia as we would have earlier? Or would we take it as a lesson learned and maybe diversify? But again, that would be our choice.
Sir, coming to the next question, What is the motivation? What do you think is the motivation for Zelensky to go on like this on this war, despite all the destruction and so many lives lost? It is estimated that more than 55,000 people have lost lives in Ukraine. What is this motivation of his, and how do you think this NATO countries have come together when there were a lot of frictions being seen earlier before the war started? Despite all the
Completely.
difficulties that European countries are facing today of energy crisis and everything, and how did they? What made them join this war?
Very true. The first point, why Zelensky and see where Ukraine is today is not an outcome of the last 1 year or so. The Ukraine of today is an outcome of the last 20 odd years. The public opinion of Ukraine, in which, to a good extent, Western intelligence played a role in creating or applying propaganda in Ukraine against Russia. And this propaganda went into overdrive after 2014, after Crimea, right? So, as a consequence, over a period of time, within Ukraine, uh, people have gotten to not only dislike, gotten to start hating Russia since a while. And Russia's actions when the war started, further accentuated that. So I would say that it's not only Zelensky and what is motivating him. It's all Ukrainians right now. It seems they really hate Russia. So for them, it is either fight or we are dead in a scenario. So that's what's driving them. But of course, taking this fight this far has been, of course, absolutely aided and abetted by the Western forces, by US and NATO. Without whose support, they would have not reached anywhere, right? But the point is that the brief, or say the energy or the angst that Zelensky carries is of maybe a nationalist leader who is totally convinced that Russia is my enemy, and he sees no other path other than fighting the enemy with all that he has at his resources and marshalling those resources from wherever he can. When Borowski gives speeches world over to the parliaments and all, that's how I think Zelensky looks at it, and that's how probably a vast number of Ukrainians also look at this war. That is one. Now, secondly, Europe. Yes, you're absolutely right. In fact, before this war, okay, NATO is a military alliance, but EU was a very vague concept. European Union, they had no cloud. I mean, they had, but it was not a solid agency, so to say. In fact, I remember about 3 years or odd years ago, a senior Dutch former diplomat was talking to me and he said, Robin, we should do something between EU and India because whatever is happening is either US India or it used to be London centered because Europe for India would be London, right? So Europe India would be in some summits or some initiatives between which were based out of London. But after Brexit, now there's EU. So pointing that EU, I think, did have an identity kind of a crisis of sorts. But that's the side. NATO, of course, yes. I mean, Macron had said a few years earlier sometime that NATO is brain dead, okay, or even Germany. So there were those divisions or if not a rift, but divisions within NATO. But what this war has done has totally not only unified, in fact, expanded NATO. Now you have countries which were never considered or which never, thought of joining NATO, like Finland and Sweden, are asking to join NATO. Now, why this is happening? I think what is happening in Europe in this past 1 year has been, if not a revival, yes, a revival of a sense of we Europeans. We are Europe. If you see all of the statements from the head of the NATO, Jens Stoltenberg General, or the EU President, that lady, they all talk about European values, we Europeans. So they've not rediscovered, yeah, but they've kind of refreshed the idea that we are Europe and we have to be together and we can be together. And we want to preserve our values. And this attack on Ukraine is an attack on our values. And that's what Zelensky has been able to persuade them also, by the way. But that's something that they also wanted themselves to win it. And in this also the role of the Eastern European countries, the former Warsaw Pact countries, has been more pronounced. As you were saying, if there was, a rift within NATO, you will see that the Eastern European countries, like the Polands of the world, have been much more aggressive, and the Lithuanias and Latvias, than the old world NATO, France and Germany. Germany, in fact, in the initial months or before the war, refused overflight permissions for some aid going to Ukraine. So there was that, there were those gaps within Europe, but over a period of time, and especially Germany has been blamed often within NATO of, not coming along, dragging its feet, so to say. But what a U-turn Germany made. Imagine, they overnight, within a week, they doubled their defense budget, going from 50 billion odd euros to 100 billion odd euros, right? So this has seen, I would say, not a revival, but this is now NATO 2.0. Okay, that's what I would look at.
Absolutely to the point, sir. You're absolutely correct on that. And my connected question was, don't you think that the only Western narrative is being played out in the media, and that Russian viewpoint is somewhat not heard of forcefully? This you have already answered. But then what do you think of Russian propaganda? Because they are also observing the Western countries and how they were propagating their values, their propaganda. First of all, is the Western propaganda or whatever is coming out in media, isn't it lopsided?
Yes, I would say absolutely it is lopsided. But you see, the point is, America has declared and has, has openly said that Russia is its enemy. The 2016 elections, the 2016 elections which were held, right, wherein Russia is supposed to have interfered, cyber attacks or whatever in favor of, against Hillary in favor of Trump, and American intelligence says that so. According to American intelligence, they have proof and they're convinced that Russia did it. So America wants to punish Russia, and America thinks that Russia is the enemy. One. Now that said, then you demonize the other. Over a period of time, Putin has been demonized as a dictator, and not only as a dictator, but as somebody who is kind of interfering in other countries and other democracies. So this demonizing of Putin has been going on for several years. But now coming to the war of the present, yes, it's the Western narrative. They control the, if not control, I mean, those are the channels which feed the global commons. That is where we get even our inputs most of it. I mean, okay, now in this war, by the way, it's good we had some of our TV channels, in some of which you and Dr. Tripathi have been with us, we've been together, who have sent their reporters on the ground and getting some information. But the strategic information still you'll see is the British intelligence saying that the number you quoted, that 100,000 have been killed, British intelligence or whatever, or at times no one is even quoted or cited. Some information comes out that Putin is sick or unwell, he has cancer, or his girlfriend is, going for a plastic surgery, has been discovered. So all of that variety of informations out there are, yes, Western propaganda. Russia, of course, faces one challenge simply is language, right? Because anything which is generated out of the UK or broadly the West is in English, it travels around the world faster, right? Russian, whatever they may be saying, when they put it together and they put it out, it takes a while to go out there. So Russia faces that challenge of propaganda. It is the Western narrative, and no matter we may say that the world is not with them, but you see, the G7 or the top 10, 12 countries, economies of the world are totally for this war with America, and they're the ones who count. The G7, you also throw in Japan, throw in Australia, all the NATO, Europe and America. Africa, so many countries, yes. Russia is having some success in its propaganda in Africa. right? In some countries like Bali and Central African Republic and a few others, Russian soldiers are helping out the governments there and they're kicking out the French. So South Africa, they're doing their exercise right now, correct? So Russia is having success in Africa, wherein the African nations are saying that we want to be neutral. Yes, please. I think maybe we are running out. I need to log in again. Is that so?
Yeah. Sir. Sorry, sir,
Okay,
for this
sure.
interruption.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yes.
Sir.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. We were at very interesting juncture where we ended this discussion. And we'll come to that in the end. So there are two questions which come to my mind, but we will keep it for the last part. First is whether Russia will ever give back the land that it has already taken, Crimea or whatever portions of Donbass. And also, isn't it deliberate that Zelensky has been made larger than life figure by these Western media and all the leaders of European Union and others? Anyway, so this will come to the end. But before that, sir, what does Biden's visit to Ukraine mean to you at this juncture? Hasn't it complicated the war further? That's one. And secondly, what are the implications of Russia pulling out of the key nuclear treaty after Russia said it is the West which started the war, not Russians. It was a war. हमारे ऊपर ये war थोपी गई है. And how real is the nuclear war from your point of view, sir?
Thank you so much. One, Biden and his visit to Kiev. You know, Biden has become, since the Second World War, the tallest military leader of the Western Alliance. Since the Second World War, he's leading a very successful consortium against whosoever it be in times of war. One. Second, his visit to Kiev was interesting. Sure, surprise and all other things aside. You know, Bush and Obama also went to war zones in Afghanistan and Iraq. But there you had US troops on the ground in both of those countries when those presidents went. In Kiev, it's a total war zone, no American troops on the ground in Kiev, right? So this was, so to say, a brave step by Biden. And he went there absolutely, yes, to convey that the US stands firmly, very firmly with Ukraine in its fight or war against Russia. So now, has it complicated? Yeah, it has complicated, of course, but at the same time, it has simplified also by clearly showing the world that the US and NATO are together at the hip. They will keep funding Ukraine with money, with military aid, with intelligence help, as you very correctly have pointed out, and with whatsoever other means they can in order to roll back Russia. That. Now, so that's perhaps that answers the Biden thing. Biden, I mean, there are questions about Biden's leadership back home in America, definitely. And with regards to the overall Ukraine war, there are voices in the Republican Party and also in the Democrats who are saying, why this war? Why do we need to write a blank check? But that aside, fairly, you see, Biden has succeeded in creating a reality of this doctrine of democracies versus dictatorships. And, you know, democracy is sacrosanct. So we have to stand with democracy and we have to stand against dictators. And Putin has been painted a dictator since ages. So we have to go in with this war. Even the Republicans may say that we may, reduce some of the tap, but when it comes to democratic values, America, having put its foot in, will have to keep on going along with it. And now, but also one little interesting, background over this, US faced a huge debacle and an embarrassment in withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now all that is forgotten by the total chaos, the total project failures of the way in which the US evacuated its own soldiers and whatsoever those pictures you remember from Kabul airport, people clinging to the aircrafts, that reminded people in the US of Vietnam, evacuation from Saigon embassy helicopters, and also that was a major embarrassment. But the Ukraine war has kind of wiped out that chapter from the collective memory or psyche of America. It's about Ukraine now, and America and NATO and the proxy fighter in the ring. Ukraine is doing a good job, and we are upholding democracy the world over, and we have solidified NATO and Europe. We've added to NATO 2 more countries. We've reinforced the sense of we Europeans and our European values. So that's all combined in this visit of fighting. Now, secondly, excuse me, with regards to Russia pulling out of this nuclear treaty today, I think on the ground it makes no difference. You see, as of today, Russia has maybe around 6,000 nuclear warheads, maybe something like that. America has maybe 500 less, 5,500. As per this treaty, both parties were limited to deploying 1,550 nuclear warheads. So out of the 6,000 that Russia has, it has put on active mode or deployment mode 1,550, and same with America, give or take a few. So they already have that many number of nuclear weapons to use against each other. Now, if Russia pulls out of this treaty, will it make or manufacture more bombs? Okay, it may. But in case of a war, a nuclear war, 100 nukes, if they reach the other country, are enough to finish off the country totally. So no matter, I mean, in nuclear weapons, having beyond a few is a matter of how often do you want to bomb the same pillar again and again and again and again, right? So in terms of numbers, from a military point of view, I would think that it makes no difference. It does make a difference, however, in terms of the overall regime or doctrine of avoiding a nuclear war, because each such step kind of moves away a little bit of the variety of mechanisms, which have been built up over time to prevent humanity from sliding down a nuclear war. Now, in terms of the capabilities and all, you see, I mean, we use terminologies like tactical weapons. Now, what is a tactical weapon? A tactical weapon is apparently anything under 100 kiloton of melee. Anything more than 100 kiloton going up to 500, 800 over 1,000 kilotons apparently around there are strategic. So tactical. The bomb which was the drop on Hiroshima, Nagasaki, one was a 20 kiloton, another was 15 kiloton. And rough numbers, if you look, 1 kiloton decimates about 10,000 people. So even if we talk, tactical weapons as if it's something small, 50 kiloton tactical nuke would end up decimating 500,000 people immediately, and then other, etc. So these numbers, to my mind, from the point of view of the destruction and devastation that they can cause, is immaterial, because both already have. What it also does, there is China in the background. China has maybe around 300. China will say, okay, and China is targeting to have about 1,000 warheads by 2030, I think, right? So China will say, why should I not have at least 1,550? If you guys can have it, and that's whatever, so even I should have. So China's race in any case is ongoing. But Putin's walking out from this treaty is, I think, symbolic, but it does add, if there's a clock, it does little bit move the needle of the clock, perception and heightened tensions wise.
I also fully endorse your views, sir, and I believe that no responsible nation or leader will ever use these mutually destroying kind of munitions, nuclear weapons. So it's not sane to use it in this kind of scenario. Coming on to the next part, we'll go on fast. How do you see the role of China, sir? And how is China likely to play its cards? And especially in the light of what Zelensky said. Zelensky said that if China sides with Russia, this will definitely lead to Third World War. And whereas Putin hails China's coming together with Russia at this crucial time as a very important event. And there's a talk of Xi going and visiting Russia very soon. And very interesting news which also emerged from Western media. France is calling India to mediate in this war and to end this war. All wars always end with talks. There's no other way that wars will ever end. And talks are something which we don't see in the any horizon as of now, sir. Your take on these, sir.
Thank you so much. Very interesting set of questions. You throw so much at here. So I'm trying to jot down some bullet points. I'll work backwards quickly and
Yes.
some deeper. Uh, all wars have to end in talks, yes, but you see, sometimes wars are necessary. America would still have been a slave-owning country had not the Civil War been there, okay, or had not the forces of the Union won. There would be slave owners all over America. World War II, Nazi Hitler would not have, been removed without a war. Sometimes wars are necessary and wars do happen. But yes, after that, there are talks, right? So it depends how the war ends, one victor or the other, and then talks. Secondly, France calling on India to mediate. I would look at these things as sugar-coated words, diplomacy. Sure, there is a potential to it also. But, you are the guys who are in the middle of it. You are the guys who are kind of deciding things. You guys should figure out ways to end this war. Sure, if you want India, then invite India, not just like this. Invite India in a systematic manner. Maybe it is happening. We do not know, right? Maybe invite India and say, okay, you know what, India, we give you a mandate. India cannot just, barge into the door and say, I want to, guys, sit down, cool down, peace down. Give us a mandate. Give us a mandate that, yes, India, these are our parameters. If you can help us mediate on these terms with Russia, we will. But by the way, the terms which the West wants will never be acceptable to Russia. India understands that. So why should we put our feet into these troubled waters? Or maybe we should, I don't know. We could. Okay, it will depend. But that's the situation with peace talks right now. Now, coming to what Zelensky said about China. See, Zelensky is a smart operator. He's a smart communicator. He picks up any trends or strands which he knows will tickle the West or the insecurities of the West. Iran. Iran is supplying drones. He will talk more about that because he knows America will get riled up. Israel will get riled up. Israel will pressure America. Okay. Iran. China, it goes, for the US, China is, and I'll come to China now. So he picks up anything which you find that, which can help him to convey to the West that there are lots of threats out there. And the ones who are not collaborating with you and us are in the opposite camp. Let's get them in. Okay. Ukraine has not been very happy with India also, of course, though it's a matter of, polite diplomatics. They may say this, that, we invite India to kind of help us. We thank India for humanitarian, yes, they should. But I think, they are not there where we would or they would want each other to be. Now coming to China. Before coming to the China-Russia situation, the issue with China is that, and America again, is that America is the number one empire in the world today. China is the number two empire. China is preparing, doing all to be the number one. America now, since 3-4 years, has decided that it will never let China become the number one. Till about 4-5 years ago, it was all going along. US thought we'll coexist or we'll co-manage or get them into the tent and all. And even if growing economy, there were trade wars during Trump time. Those were different. But suddenly, America has woken up in the last 3 to 4 years that, oh, China is breathing down our neck. And we have to do something to ensure that China does not become number one. So that is the big war other happening out there. And that war has two components. One is this overall China number one, America not wanting it, and the other is the issue of Taiwan, which America wants to protect, or so to say. Now, in order for that, America has decided that technology is the key to the future. So making all efforts that China does not gain technology edge. That's why they embargoed Huawei, no more Huawei networks. In US, Australia, New Zealand, UK, some countries, no more Huawei, no more your telecom technologies. Because if Huawei succeeds, then in 5 years' time, see the world, Android or Google, or Apple. If I have an Android phone, I can use that only charger. If I have an Apple phone, I can use only that charger. So if the world of tomorrow is running on Chinese standards, actually the battle is about standards, the technology standards. So if technology standards prevail in more and more of the world markets, then obviously it will be Chinese goods which will be sold, or even if goods made in Europe, but according to Chinese standards, which will be sold. So the war is of standards of the future, be it in space technologies, be it in underwater drones, be it in AI, be it in robotics, be it in anything. So that's the one big game out there. So America wants to deny China that ability now in the future. The CHIPS Act, which America has passed, is going to severely constrain China's abilities to proceed ahead in the chip manufacturing sector. There's only one company in the world which manufactures one big lithography equipment, which is a Dutch company. They have said, okay, they will stop selling to China. So America is taking all these steps to cut off China from technology leadership. That's where, and China is seeing it. I mean, sitting here in India or anywhere in the world, we are all seeing it. So Chinese who are there within the decision-making circles would be seeing it much more, and their intelligence, right? So they're realizing. So that's where China, America is. So there is a conflict. I'll tell you an interesting theory. I mean, you guys are academics. There's an interesting theory amongst the conservative circles in the US, especially espoused by Steve Bannon, who was a close advisor to Trump. His theory was that America needs a big war every 80 years to remain the world power, superpower. The first big war after America's independence was the Civil War. After the Civil War was which next? First of the Second World War. And 80 years after that is now 2020s, 2030s. And Steve Bannon had been saying it will be a war between America and China. So, I mean, we don't know. I don't go with conspiracy theories, but there are some patterns. This is quite circulated in the US. So, China-America tensions and rivalry will grow, and they will get dirtier over time, I think, as time goes along. Now coming to Russia. Yes, Russia is so what America is attempting right now is actually to be the solo superpower of the world. See, here in Europe, it's achieving part of that objective, it seems. Okay. Here, along on the Chinese theater, the South China Seas and all, again, here America is ramping up its alliances and all of that to ensure that it is the dominant power in this theater Pacific also. So all in all, then America is the solo superpower. I'll step back one bit and then your question, please. I know we are running away. My sense of what's happening in Russia right now, my sense, we are already in a third world war. Times of the Second World War are gone when millions would die in dozens of countries for it to be a world war. This is already a world war happening. How this world war will end, we do not know yet. A fourth world war, or a big war, you may call it, let's not call it a war, will be in the South China Seas because of two factors. Taiwan is separate, and America-China #1 rivalry is other. Taiwan is a separate topic. And wider expansionism in South China and America trying to, contain China. So that would be a conflict there. And China, by the way, has clearly said that by 2049, it will assimilate Taiwan. It will be 100 years of Chinese Communist Party of China. Excuse me. By then, China would have, if claims wants. And Xi Jinping has said, it is the duty of our generation not to leave this Taiwan issue for the next generation. So not even 2049, assume Xi Jinping generation another 10, 15 years. China will do something. So the fourth big war is going to happen here. And then a fifth war will come back to Europe. Because this third war, which is going on right now, Russia will end up most probably being on the losing side of things, whichever way, even if it comes to an armistice. There will be no clear-cut winner, loser in this war, we don't know yet. But assume there is some kind of a ceasefire. Russia will be humiliated, just like World War I, Germany. Germany then took another 15, 20 years. A new political class emerged, sense of nationalism emerged, and Germany then went for the kill again to take, so to say, a revenge of its, World War I humiliation. Russia will only strike back. So, unfortunately, I see third, fourth, fifth, big, conflagrations in this world happening. That's what I see, unfortunately.
Sir, to the point, and what deep insights you have really given, sir, and wide-ranging bird's eye view. It's really amazing to have you on our panel. And how do you see this war? You have already answered it a bit. How does it go hereafter? I mean, in very, very brief. How is it going to culminate?
Oh, we really do not know. This war will keep on grinding. Europe used to have like 10-year war, 20 years war of roses, etc. It will be something like that. Ukraine will become a battleground, hot war, cold war, pause going on, etc. Russia will keep on grinding. But a point could come if Ukraine gains more momentum, that Ukraine, if not kicks out, but from eastern Ukraine, if Ukraine gains the upper edge with whatever tanks or whatever and better intelligence and fatigue of Russia, I think one tipping point everyone says will come if Ukraine moves towards Crimea, if all of this and towards Crimea. And if there it starts getting success, then one, of course, open sky blue threat is a tackle nuke on Ukraine. Because if Putin is cornered totally, if Russia is cornered totally, they will do something. And remember something from what I feel, it is not only Putin, it's the nationalist elite advisors and that coteries and a large number of Russians who do believe that this war is being forced upon them, who do believe that the Ukrainians have been misled to fight with them, whereas they're brothers, so to say. So there will be some dark step. One extreme scenario could be that, see, Zelensky, if he goes, won't make a difference. Another Zelensky will come, and this war will continue. But on the Russian side, if Putin goes, then there are two options or possibilities. If Putin goes naturally, is a different matter. If he goes naturally, heart, stroke, whatever, the next guy who comes will be Putin. Okay. But there could be a possibility of a coup or a killing, whatever, in the Kremlin. If that happens, then there's a 50% chance that the next set of people who come will be even more hardliners than Putin. They are saying, and they will say that Putin was not executing the war correctly, not enough harshly. We have to go now all out. 50% chance of that. Or 50% chances that somebody who, whichever group and displaces him, throws up the white flag and says Putin was a fool, everyone around him was a fool, we want to stop the war, that's it. So the probability of the war stopping, these are extreme probabilities. Otherwise, this war will go on, it will drag on, and it will drag on.
So, thank you so much, sir. Colonel MP Singh is joining. I think he got disconnected. And it's my honor, sir, to have the opportunity to extend vote of thanks for today's exclusive interview session. Sir, you really pointed out the various dynamics, various trends and trajectory of this Russia-Ukraine war that we wanted. As we know that your long-standing experience on geopolitics and especially on economic relations and the way you have covered foreign affairs. So it's really insightful. Today's your deliberations will be very valuable. I hope that strongly it will be available for policymakers, especially India's policymakers. Those generally we are in the drag of dilemma. Indian foreign policy is generally faces a strong status dilemma. Uh, 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 we should be more and more mature about the closeness research closeness towards China. We should be confident our trusted partnership and our partnership is very robust with the Russian Federation. So we should be very confident on Russian Federation. And this war has pushed Russia into the China war. So that, but that does not mean that we are losing our traditional ally. And sir, your interpretation is that you mentioned in your interview that yes, democracies do not fight each other. This is something that democratic peace theory and that you mentioned in your deliberation. So I said I strongly hope that yes, democracies do not fight each other, and that is why Biden always trying to create a balance between the democracies and authoritarian regime. So and the Russia, stands with the China in terms of the authoritarianism and entire NATO, EU, as well as the USA. But this theory again fails because we have seen lots of examples that democracies fight each other just because of the cultural differences, security issues, and economic factors. So, sir, you really pointed out that yes, democracy, this war has been created in terms of the binary, and Biden has been successful in forging the unity within the divided EU. So, thank you so much, sir, for this your very calibrated idea as well as your insights. The last point that you mentioned that is very important for all of us because we all talking about the third world war and you mentioned now the war is going on. This is not going to be declared the third world war the way the one western bloc is engaged with the Ukraine and the entire for example North Korea and Iran and Russia and somehow to a very hesitant support to Russia, Chinese hesitant support to Russia is somehow to reflect that yes, there is a caucus between the Russian group and another is the Western group. But as far as the India's position, you mentioned that yes, we are very confident in our position that we do have entitled to have its own choice, and our choice is the Russia. Despite of the lots of pressure from the West, we have maintained our robust, friendly, trustworthy relationship with Russia. So thank you so much, sir, for your today's very insightful, narration of this Russia-Ukraine war. And thank you so much, sir, Manoj, sir, for your very, burning questions that generally, put in the media and policymakers. So thank you so much, sir, both of you.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I'll make quick 3 points to what you're saying. I know it's, I mean, after a vote of thanks, but since the issue is so important, you raised.
Yeah.
One, yes, the weaker Russia gets, the more of a loss it is for us because it goes into China's camp. It really is a loss for us building up. That's why. Secondly, yes, our good and all, but and we are being recognized by all the powers. But remember one thing in geopolitics: the world salutes the rising sun, and all nations have long memories. So right now they are saying that yeah, we agree, we understand your compulsions in buying oil and all, etc. But sometime in the future they can come back to knock us and say, guys, you were not in our camp when we wanted. We got to be very careful of that. So that's the second thing that I would like just to point out. And one quick last thing, in terms of Russia, we recently in India we had a $168 billion deal with Boeing and Airbus. Now we are held back by purchasing 2 billion immediate and another 20 billion if we want their fighters. India should play the game. $168 billion business we've given you, West. if we want in our national interest, if we think that these are the best aircraft that we need and Russia is giving us the best deal, we should be able to spend 20 billion. What is 20 billion versus 168? You take your 168, be happy. We'll give this 20 to Russia. We'll have to play hardball like that.
Thank you so much for the observation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.